Welcome, everyone, to the High Performance Legal Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Arkfeld, president and founder of Prevail Legal Marketing. And today, Dov Slansky, the VP of Solutions Engineering with Litify, is joining us. Litify is the most intuitive, fully integrated, and powerful platform for legal. Dov, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Let's get started. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with / started Litify. I want to hear a little bit about the founder story.
Sure. So I'm an attorney by background. Generally these days I get referred to as a recovering attorney, non-practicing at the moment. I had done a variety of legal work early on in my career, mostly on the plaintiff side. So personal injury, mass tort work, employment work. And I was working at a large law firm with some of the other founders here at Litify. And we kind of had the idea that, well, not the idea, we wanted to overhaul the firm's technology at the time. We set out to do so using Salesforce.com. And we quickly realized that if we were going to build a piece of technology for the firm, we were onto something. And we can really go ahead and do that for law firms in general. We started the company, we started building our software. This is about 5 years ago or so. And started selling to law firms in the plaintiff space and started getting a really, really good response from the marketplace. The legal sector in general is a little behind the technology curve, trying to catch up quickly now. Legal tech is one of the hottest tech sectors there is right now. So they're catching up quickly, but traditionally over the last decade or so, they've been a little bit behind. So we got a great response to what we were doing. And over the last couple of years, we've transitioned from only working with plaintiff firms to working with full service and defense firms, and even over the last year with some acquisitions over to corporate legal departments, in-house counsel as well.
Why did you decide to start in the plaintiff category, and how is that different from a software perspective than other practice areas?
Sure, it's actually really different. It's one of the smaller practice areas, right? So when people start to think of legal technology, they typically tend to focus on just what you call your sort of regular or your full service, your defense side law firms, right? The people you see in movies, the people that handle your mergers and acquisitions for your big companies. They're a lot larger. There's definitely more money in that space. People tend to focus there. We started in the plaintiff sector probably for two reasons. One, collectively some background there. Again, I had done a lot of work there. We had known them really, really well. Plaintiff firms are also really, really workflow based, or they should be really workflow based. So they are a really right fit for a piece of technology that wraps around your workflows in a consistent way. So thinking about what Salesforce does for sales or service departments, our ability to bring the Salesforce platform to a law firm on the plaintiff side, which carries that same type of workflow background, was really, really tailored. And so far, so good.
Yeah. I wonder, you said that the legal tech space is one of the highest growing, technology spaces. And I mean, when 5 years ago, when you were considering the idea, were there not other solutions, or did you think that you could do it better, or why did you go down the road? Because there was definitely legal tech available at the time.
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
Tons. As a matter of fact, I've actually maintained for a while in discussions that legal was actually really early to technology. When you go around and you look at law firms, for example, they have been using, legal CRMs there have been firms that have been doing it since the late 80s, which is not necessarily long before other companies found technology, but for a sort of a niche slice of the market, they were pretty early to technology. What happened was they kind of stopped at some point. They built it out. They went from DOS to Windows. I can't believe we're having that discussion, but we went from DOS to Windows, and they kind of just sort of paused for a little bit. So when we looked around, it wasn't that there was a dearth of technology. There's tons of it. But what we noticed was there wasn't the same technology that the quote unquote regular world was using. Law firms although their employee counts might lead you to think otherwise, they're big businesses. Their revenue lines are vastly outsized the number of people who work there. Yet they don't get treated like a business. The lawyers who run these companies may be brilliant legal minds. They are generally speaking terrible business minds. And they run their law firms as if they're practicing law and not like the business it needs to be. So business software was largely absent. You don't see ERPs or CRMs in the legal world. You see case management systems, which are really focused on managing a specific case or a specific set of documents. When we saw that, that's where we realized that it wasn't that there was a lack of technology, there was a lack of this broad platform technology. And that Salesforce, which had been so successful in other industries, in hospitality and healthcare and government, manufacturing, sales, obviously, it people in the legal world literally have never heard of the company. It's a crazy thing. It happens on calls all the time. I said, you know what Salesforce was? No, I don't know. And how they have a market cap of like $50 billion. And the reason is simply there never was that connection to legal. And we set out to bring that connection in, and their response has been fantastic, because running your law firm like a business is something that these people have been desperate. Perhaps they didn't realize it, but they've been desperate for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And Salesforce is such an enterprise level company that, it probably for most attorneys seems like too big of a company to just go sign up for a Salesforce account, right? And
Oh,
requires
for
an
sure.
incredible amount of consulting, configuration. It's not easy to do on your own.
Yeah, and then even if they do decide to try and pull that trigger, they get over to the Salesforce world, and it's like speaking a different language, right? They're thinking about cases and matters and intakes and conflicts, and people in Salesforce world are going like, okay, how about where are your leads, where are your opportunities? And it's like it's like a language barrier almost. Um, and the whole Salesforce ecosystem is designed around the way to use Salesforce, and the whole legal ecosystem is the way to practice law, and they simply don't connect. Now we really sit at that junction now, where we're taking the technology and we have the expertise to make it work for a legal department, and not in like a square peg round hole way, round peg square hole, no, square peg round hole way, but more like it's a custom way of doing it, so when they lay hands on it, it's designed from the ground up for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I actually want to just hear a little bit more about, you have experience at a handful of law firms prior to starting Litify. And I just want to hear what you learned working at so many different law firms. And what sort of experiences you took away with that to help you into this Litify journey.
Sure. That's a dangerous question. I learned that lawyers are, generally speaking, brilliant, strategists and legal minds. They really don't have a desire or an appetite to run a business. Operationally, law firms are lagging behind, particularly in the plaintiff sector, but even still in the larger firms, you might not see a true operational structure. In fact, there's been a movement over the last number of years for legal project management, which sounds crazy, right? Well, who doesn't have project management in what they do? Well, law firms don't, and law firms now have a concept of legal project management. And the reason is because they realize that they're running a business. And if they're going to undertake something, they need to have that structure where there's tasks and there's deadlines and there's to-do items. And yes, there's legal work. We have to write briefs and litigation and go to court. But the structure of how that happens and the data that lets me know that I'm doing a good job or a bad job or a poor job or I could improve, that's super, super important. So at the few different law firms I worked at, they were each different in their own way, but each one really had that need for operational process and structure. And when you bring that operational process, which again is largely going to be done with technology, when you bring that operational structure, that's where you start to have transparency. You start to really be able to understand how the business works, where the revenue is coming from, how to optimize or make it better, how to make your people more efficient, how to bring best practices in. It's really focused on that, turning that flashlight on for that transparency that you're looking for at a business.
Now, there's probably people listening to this podcast that are brilliant legal minds, and they don't really want to go the business route. Either it's just not appealing to them for a variety of reasons. What advice would you give someone that's sitting there? Maybe they have a couple attorneys, they want to grow, but they don't necessarily, this is like not their superpower, right? They're just not excited about, onboarding a technology platform or a CRM. I mean, it's probably not at the top of most people's like excitement, bucket list, right? Onboard CRM to my company.
I
So
imagine it's at the bottom, right?
yeah, if it made the list at all, it's not at the top.
Correct.
So, what advice would you give someone in that position?
There's an old phrase, I guess, saying, I don't know, I've heard it from John Morgan, right? Don't work in your business, work on your business, right? And people who don't want to bring a CRM in or technology, you're right. And by and large, they probably shouldn't be bringing it in, right? Now they're going to make a decision of whether to do it or pay for it. But my advice would be find a person who can own that project, right? You want to turn it over to them. If you recognize that you want to grow, you might have things that are holding you back and you might not realize them. There are consultants out there that can help you understand your firm better, or you may realize that every time you need something, you have to send an email or call somebody else to do it, wait a few days, and then get an answer, right? I'm not advocating that a lawyer becomes an engineer or a developer. I think most of them don't want to anyway. Um, but if there's information you seek or understanding about what's going on and you can't get to it on your own, it speaks to the fact that you need help understanding how the business runs. Find yourself an admin, find yourself an ops person who could come inside, who can help you understand the various moving parts of the firm, who can oversee a project to bring technology into the firm that can help with those things. And it doesn't have to be vastly overblown, right? It could be something pretty simple, like a simple CRM to understand who your clients are and when the last time you spoke to them, right? Something as simple as that, which doesn't sound that daunting. It may or may not be depending on the firm, but even something like that, find someone who can run that project for you, whether it's someone you hire or it's a consultant. You can continue to be that legal mind, go to court, handle your litigations, write your briefs, do what you've been trained and love to do, and let someone go ahead and help with that task for you.
Now, is that role a full-time role or a contract project role?
Dangerous question. I guess it depends on the firm, right? It depends on the size of the firm. A solo firm, a handful of lawyers and staff, you may have your IT on contract, right? You have a managed services company that handles your IT. They may be able to oversee a project like this for you. If you're truly in growth mode and you want to go from 50 cases to 500 cases or 10 people to 50 people, this is a hire that you're going to want to make. Now versus later, some of that's going to be dependent on cash flow, some of it's going to be dependent on the projects you have. It's likely going to be a hire you want to make. And I think the way in which I tend to look at it is if you look around at non-legal businesses, most of them outside of retail, but even the larger retail, but most of them have an operations role. It could be a COO, it could be an operations manager, it could be even an office manager. But there's someone whose role is just simply to make sure that things are working properly. Law firms for a long time have avoided that role, either on purpose or by accident. You can repurpose an existing person you have. You might have a senior paralegal who just knows how things work. You might have a junior attorney that has an aptitude for technology. You might have a receptionist that has extra time in their day to spend on things. My advice would be to find someone who can own this project, whether you bring them in or a contractor or a part-time or a full-time employee, and let them focus on this. I think first of all, they'll thank you. Their career will take off. It's an incredible boost to someone to have that technology and operational experience. And secondly, your firm will be better for it. You're going to put yourself on a foundation that lets you grow, with stability.
Do you think the person needs to have an incredible amount of technical experience or background? You mentioned a lot of roles right there that are not by their nature very technical, but we're talking about onboarding a CRM. Do you think that's necessary?
I actually don't. I'll use myself as an example here. I'm an attorney. I learned the technology side on the job. Right, I was working at a law firm, and we wanted to bring in a piece of software. We brought in Salesforce, and I think back to what we were doing with Salesforce at the time, and it's funny now because we thought we were amazing, and now I think we're amazing. But 8 years ago, it was like, oh. But we brought it in. We kind of figured it out on the way. We were a small law firm. We were only a handful of people at the time. We brought it in. I kind of learned on the job how to do it, and I've realized two things. One, I realized how much we needed it at the firm. And two, I realized how much I enjoyed it much more so than being an attorney. So, and even for our customers here at Litify, when we're working with a customer and they're looking for, who should be the admin, so to speak, on the system, right? Salesforce administrator. We will very often counsel them to look internally, look for someone who wants to do it. It's not incredibly difficult, regardless of what system you're on, to learn how it works. But if you have that operational mindset and that aptitude to work on the business, you'll excel at it, even without this sort of grand technology background. I am no, computer science major, I can assure you.
Yeah, and I feel like if you put a job posting out that says I'm looking for a Salesforce administrator or something like that, I mean, the salary requirement's going to be 150 grand. I mean, or more maybe.
Yeah, I mean, in big cities, it gets up there. For a regular admin, you're probably looking at, 90 grand. Maybe smaller cities,
Yeah.
it's 60, 70 grand. It's probably more than what you'd want to pay starting out, unless you really are committed to that growth mode. And that's it. We'll counsel firms, like, you don't have to go out and hire a trained admin. You need to hire someone who has the right desire. And again, aptitude is probably the best word for it. If you find that, you're still using an iPhone 4 because you can't give up Touch ID because you're not sure how you're going to deal with it, that's probably not the right person for, to be the admin on the system. But someone who, is dealing with a new Android phone every year because they like to root it on the side, that person, yeah, they're a paralegal, but they may also be an admin.
Yeah, and you're totally right, Dov, about giving them a little bit of experience to really boost their resume, just as, kind of investing in your team and as a human, having implementation of a large scale CRM project on Salesforce, that is no simple task. So that's a significant credibility booster there.
Oh, we see it in IT departments all the time. We'll talk to someone who's in IT at a law firm who occasionally we'll say hesitant, right? They don't know Salesforce that well, right? It's not their bag of tricks. They know the current CRM. They're not in love with bringing in something new necessarily. But what we see is that they quickly kind of look around and be like, well, hang on a second. I don't love the fact that, I'm in my, 40s or 50s and I have to learn a new piece of software. But if I do, first of all, I'm incredibly valuable to this thing, right? My value here has just 10x. Instead of being the guy who just makes sure the fan is blowing on the server, right? A little pejorative there, but instead of being that guy, I actually have a hand in how the firm makes money, right? I'm owning a really important piece at the firm. And then obviously, if I'm looking to grow my career, I can take that skill. If it says Salesforce on your resume, I mean, the demand for Salesforce talent is just incredible right now. And if you know how it works, the sky's the limit for where you can go with your career.
Yeah, and what I found at our company is if there's only one person in a role, like because we have some roles that where there's just like not a lot of, we don't have a high number of people, the value of that person just like you're saying, gets so much higher. If you have 4 Salesforce administrators at one company, it's a lot different than being the only Salesforce administrator. And where if something, you just have so much more value if you're the only one. It's a little bit more high risk too, but it's based on the size of your company. If you don't need 4, you don't need 4. So it's just what it is.
Yeah,
But yeah.
for sure. I mean, look, we've along the way, I've seen, a bunch of attorneys, way more than I thought for sure, but a bunch of attorneys who have looked around and said, you know what? I'd rather not practice. I'd rather transition. The firm has to support it, obviously, but I'd rather transition and either be the admin at the firm or work for a consulting company that does, legal technology consulting because, as lawyers, your brain is trained to think logically. And looking at a piece of software like Salesforce, there's a lot of logic and workflow to it. And once you know the industry, and if there's a specific tool that is being used in that industry now, um, it's kind of cool to be able to make that jump.
Nice. Shifting gears a little bit, and this is not for necessarily smaller law firms who are looking for a CRM, but I'm just curious what the number one challenge you see attorneys facing who are wanting to grow or in the middle of growth mode for their firm. So again, not necessarily real small. It could be a mid-sized firm, but what do you see as one of the biggest challenges for attorneys trying to grow?
I think it varies by industry, to be honest, but there are some consistent challenges to growth. Um, One is simply people's fear of change, right? And I think that's actually more prevalent at the larger enterprises, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but I think it's more prevalent to larger enterprises than the smaller ones. Um, if we talk, if you're a law firm of 20 people or 30 people or 50, whatever it might be, and you're looking to grow, with that growth comes a tremendous amount of change. Overnight, sometimes things are going to be different. You have to open a new office, you have to bring on new people, you might need new technologies, a different practice area or case. When people are looking to grow, very often it's not what the money that it costs to grow. It's not the head count that you're going to need to support it. It's simply the unknown. Like, I'm now changing what I'm doing. I was very comfortable. I was a lawyer and I did X and Y and Z every day. And I now need to do something different. And that's a very large hurdle for some people to overcome. I think the general, things that you think of as being resistant turn out to be less. I mean, look, law is a good high margin business. People can afford to make a change. They can afford to grow. By and large, they can afford to invest in their firm. They need to have the ability to change. And I think the second one is the ability, that vision, the ability to see things. No, not to see the future, although that would be awesome, but at least a vision to see that there is a path to growth. Um, if you don't have the vision to see and look around you at other businesses or other technologies and see what's happened over there and be able to apply that to legal, it's going to be very hard for you to realize that your growth is possible and likely. You're going to look around and be like, well, I don't understand how we're going to get there. I can't envision it. And therefore, it must be we're not going to get there, and I'm not going to spend the money or the resources on getting there. Not everybody has that vision. You need to cultivate that vision within yourself, and talk to people who have done it, who have been successful at it. And if you can have that vision, it'll open up the doors to growth for you.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. And one of the things I've experienced myself in marketing technology with that vision and that openness in that direction, it requires an openness to look at and accept new technologies and not like in my head, I'll see things that are like, when IP based messaging came out and you can basically change the messaging on your website based on the company that someone's coming from, like that type of technology to me. And I'm a developer background, own a marketing company, and my mind still explodes when I see that happen. And it's like, I almost feel like it's a scam, but it's things like that in your respective space that you have to be open to. And like you said, adopting new ideas and new technologies that come in to help support your vision and really stay current, because it gets so easy to get emails, solicitation emails, or see ads and be like, no, that's not for me. Nah, it seems, I don't want it, this, that. And I think that mindset in general is really, can be really damaging to the growth of a company if the person leading with the vision isn't very open, you know?
Yeah, I had one of those moments the other day. I was talking to actually one of our customers, and he was asking me, there's a piece of technology, I forgot the name of the company, that what they do is, um, when someone fills out like your contact form on your website and they click the opt-in box, a little piece of code that sits in your website actually records the screen of them doing it, and it stores it in your CRM, so
Mm.
that invariably later when someone says I didn't opt in and they want to serve a lawsuit on you, you can actually call up that recording of them a year ago filling out the form and checking the opt-in box to receive communication, and you have proof. And it blew my mind that this, first of all, that this software existed at all. Then to know that it existed and know that I don't know a single person who leverages that software, I was like, wow, how does not everybody do this now? Like, it almost doesn't matter what it costs, right? It's really the only thing that's going to protect you from uh, whether a warranted or frivolous lawsuit down the road is something like this. And I had that moment where, like, wow, I don't believe this is real, but it apparently is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not even just beneficial in the legal space. That's beneficial in all, because, you're calling and you're texting and you're emailing and all that follow up. If someone says they didn't opt in, that's the lawsuits you're talking about.
Yep.
Yep. All right. So on the flip side, what are, like if you take a moment to think about some of the attorneys that you work with that are the highest performing and do the best, what are some of their traits where you're like, okay, I can see why, they're dominating this market in their practice area? What are some of those habits that you tend to see?
Um, So I think it's the ability for them to put a structure in place around them to support the enterprise. The firms that we work with that are the most successful are the ones that, by and large, take care of the people who work at the firm, and have a structure in place to support them, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving away free lunches every day, right? That's not, I mean, although that's not bad, but it's not really what it means. It means that they have a structure in place that values the work that their employees are doing, that have the ability to track and optimize it properly, and have that culture of feedback to them, right? Everybody needs to know if they're doing a good job. It doesn't matter what you do, you need to know if you did. So it's like an innate human need to know that you're doing something well. Certain people require more of that than others, but everybody needs to know if they're doing a good job. Everybody really does need to know if they're doing a poor job, although not everybody likes to hear that, but they certainly need to know if they're doing a poor job. The people that are high performers are the ones that, either personally have put that framework in place for themselves, that they have, a framework around them that lets them understand if they're doing things right, proper, they're excelling. And certainly for their companies that they are running, they have the ability to measure, and not in a big brother creepy, like I'm watching everything you do way, but in a way that says, I know what the objective is. I'm going to give you the support to obtain and reach that objective. And if you get there, congratulations. If you don't get there, I have the feedback for why and how to improve next time. Um, the best firms that we work with, of the hundreds of law firms that we work with, the ones who are the best unequivocally are the ones that have that structure in place. They know what needs to be done. They know who needs to do it. They support their people unfailingly in getting it done. And when they invariably miss, as some people do, they can give them that feedback for why they missed and how to make it better the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. The and I struggle with this myself, but the leaders or owners or whatever, whoever's just running the show, trying to do it all on their own, it's just you just don't have the time, especially when you get into like a project like this, like implementing a CRM. And so building that team is just so critically important. And do you have any tips? I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but any tips for giving that positive feedback on a regular basis? And I know for me, I don't know what it is, my childhood. I don't know. I'm not naturally inclined to compliment people or give them positive feedback. It is definitely not a natural thing for me. I've created a structure in my life to do that, literally structure to give acknowledgement. But, do you have any tips for that? It is off topic, but I'm curious.
It's funny. It's something that we actually are doing here as a company now at Litify. We're sort of working on that. I think most people by their nature are not prone to being effusive with praise. I think for most people it feels forced, right? It feels like, if I didn't tell you did a bad job and I smiled and you know that I like your work, then obviously you're doing a good job, right? Like, you're hired, it's clear that I like your work. I don't have to go out of my way to pat you on the back or send an email to the whole department saying how good of a job you did, because everybody knows that. When in reality, the person on the other end of that is craving that acknowledgement. And if they stop for a moment and they're really, really honest with themselves and reflect, they might know that it's happening, but they want that recognition. And it could be as something as simple as an email. Um, we have to create that structure here too. I know at Litify, we actually just rolled out, we use Slack internally, which I love. Um, it's amazing. We rolled out, there's an app for Slack called Taco. Hey Taco is what it's called. And you can hand out tacos to people, right? It seems really, really silly. It really does. And I'm not a person who typically gets involved in these things. But as a company, we're 160 people now at the company. People have taken to it like crazy. They love it. It's created an environment where people are looking for a reason to compliment people. There's no downside to it. And by earning these, virtual tacos, you can set up a reward system. Get a certain amount of tacos, the company will buy you lunch, right? Simple rewards. But there's a public channel in Slack where people can get congratulated, and they see it now. And I see it now that from a leadership perspective, the rest of our leadership team, myself included, are looking around, and we're all really looking for ways to go out of our way to congratulate people, because The people who are in the trenches, who are doing the work, again, they're doing a great job. And if they pause and reflect, they would realize it's hard. Life moves really quickly. There's a lot of work to get done. You don't have that moment sometimes. But when you get a little alert that says you got a taco or 3 tacos, you feel good about yourself. And I feel good that I gave you a taco, right? And I'm going to look to do it again. So it feels really, really sick. And I'm discussing this now. It feels really, really silly, but it works. And people are they're energized by it. So it's not really off topic, because anything you're doing, if you have that feedback loop to tell people they're doing it well, it could just be a report with a leaderboard. We encourage all of our firms to do that, right? You could look at it as public shaming sometimes if you're on the bottom. Or you could look at it as just public congratulations if you're on the top. But that leaderboard concept is really strong. It's great feedback. It's constructive. It sets a goal and allows you to strive for it. And if you achieve that goal, there should be some sort of reward system in place.
Yeah, I love that idea of the tacos. And I used to be of the mindset, where I communicate to someone and they're like, they might give me some of that feedback. Like, I don't know if I'm doing well. And I'm like, well, when I'm not saying anything to you, it means you're doing well. And I think a lot of people default into that. Well, I'm yelling at the other guy that's not doing well. If you're not hearing anything, then you're doing great. And that's just not how it works. That's just not how it works.
Right. An implied compliment is I mean, I guess it's okay, but in reality, the compliment should be explicit, right? So
Yeah. We use a platform here called Bonusly, which is exactly what you described. It's not as cool as tacos because you just give bonus points, which I'm really jealous of, actually. But Bonusly allows you to give points to people. And then when you get points, they have a redemption system in the platform. And so you can redeem it for gift cards or donate it or whatever. So, or you can create your own rewards for the company. So, if you don't want to build your own or something, that's also an option.
yeah, it's been super, super, super helpful. Like, again, just recognizing that it needs to happen has been a little bit eye-opening in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when attorneys are, so one of the things that I see is there's so many technologies out there, as we already stated. When attorneys are trying to evaluate a CRM, and do you call yourself a CRM? I mean, you are, I don't want to say enterprise level because it might sound intimidating, but you're a full package. So what do you describe yourself as? Litify.
It's a really good question. Because we're on Salesforce, people who know what Salesforce is tend to think that we're a CRM. If you don't know what Salesforce is, as many of our customers don't, they ask us, like, so what do you do? I think the best thing that we can describe ourselves as either a practice management platform or maybe even a business management platform, because there is so much that goes into it. There's top of funnel activities, marketing and intakes and leads. There's bottom of the funnel activities, the actual cases and settlements. There's reports and analytics that are inside of it for understanding what you're doing at the firm. So it really does run the gamut of everything the firm does. We will generally refer to Litify as a practice management platform to our law firms, right? Because it's a law practice. Who are corporate or in-house counsel departments. They're not really a practice, or practice manager is not necessarily the right word. Maybe it's matter management, maybe it's business management. It really depends. Again, there's a lot of technology historically that have not been as wide ranging as Litify. So I hate to be the guy who's suggesting that there is no category that can contain us, because that's a little bit hubristic. But practice management is probably the best word for it.
Yeah, but so I mean, just along those lines, you're kind of saying what the reality is that you offer probably a more comprehensive suite than any other software that you're aware of. I mean, is that basically kind of sum it up? Are there?
Yeah. Again, and it's funny, like, I have to get comfortable saying that because, again, it sounds a little bit hubristic, but we're built in Salesforce. So I get a lot of that we get to claim as something we get because, I may not be that smart, but I was smart enough to choose that great platform to build on. So now I do have access to a lot of things that a law firm or a legal department wants, that typically are difficult to build and you don't see end up in the same piece of software. We have access to them. So definitely more, wide ranging or a little bit broader than some of the other applications out there.
Now, when someone's evaluating and I hope I can ask the question this way and it's not too negative, but what types of firms is Litify not a good fit for?
Oh,
Because
great
it's
question.
to say it's a good fit. I mean, so who's not a good fit? Someone's listening, like who should not go down the Litify route?
Great question. And we're open about it because I believe that um, just because I run a for-profit business doesn't mean that I should say yes to everybody, right? Um, we have to understand who we are trying to help and sell and work with. Um, the people who are not a great fit for Litify, and again, I share your sentiment. It's not a negative statement, right? It's not a pejorative statement about their business. It's simply us being realistic and understanding what it means to set up a system like Litify. Firms on the smaller end of the spectrum, so solo practitioners, handful of people at the firm, will typically set a soft floor, which sounds really weird to tell someone, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take your money. Um, Below 10 or 15 employees at the firm, not a great fit. The reason is at that level, if you are the lawyer who owns the firm, you probably are both the lawyer who's going to court and the business manager, right? You are wearing both of those hats. It's a small company. You can afford to do so. If I want to add a third hat in of technologist or system administrator, that's the one that's going to suffer. And if that one suffers, you're not going to get it set up right. You're not going to get your training right. You're going to induce frustration because you're going to piece technology that is not optimized for what you do. So the firms who are not great fits for Litify are firms at the low end of the spectrum, firms without growth aspirations, possibly. If you run a small firm and you're just fine, you make whatever money you could possibly need. It doesn't have to get bigger. We speak to people all the time. People tell like, listen, I'm very happy. Yeah, of course, I'd like to make more money, but I'm very happy because if I grew my firm larger, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I don't want to have 200 people working for me, right? The overhead of running an enterprise like that is too much for me. And yes, they should hire a structure around that, but okay, for another discussion. Those are the firms that are not great fits for Litify. People who are a little bit simpler, they want a little bit less out of their software, they do less work, they have less people. There are some fantastic pieces of technology out there that are geared towards other firms of that nature. We recommend people to them, things like Clio or Practice Panther. There's some good technology out there for them. Firms that are in a growth mode that want the ability to do more with their staff, right? To automate processes, to do more with things, to really track and understand and run reports and analytics on what the firm is doing, and who don't mind dedicating resources to actually setting the system up. Those are great targets.
Is there I don't know if feature is the right word. Is there a feature or a part of the software that has the most impact on firms that take on the software, or something that just simply surprised you as you're building out, where you're like, I did not think this was going to have such an impact?
It's probably our document management system. And by the way, I will tell you that it's not that I wasn't surprised, is that when we set out to build it, I think that I was not as excited at spending the amount of money that we are on developing it that we did. And it turns out, I'm happy to admit I was completely wrong. It's changed our business incredibly. Um, Even some of the best, practice management or legal CRMs out there don't have a great way of handling documents. Law firms and legal departments are all about documents, tens and hundreds and millions of them. We built out a fantastic document management system that lives natively inside of Litify. That's been something that is a differentiator, is something that firms really, really would like in the same place as the rest of their information. They want it in the cloud, they want it to be secure. That's been an area where we really excelled.
Got it. All right. And just last question here to sort of round it out. We've been talking about Salesforce a lot, and what is the significance of being built on Salesforce versus other competitors or non-competitors that have just like their own technology stack and have built their own applications? I mean, it's a unique differentiator that I think a lot of people probably don't realize how unique it is. But can you just talk about what value Salesforce brings and just a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Salesforce is what we refer to as a platform, right? in the sense that it's capable of doing anything you want it to do and doing it in one place. So the advantages of us being on Salesforce, our customers being on Salesforce, is they are getting the same, database and security infrastructure and architecture that uh, Delta Airlines, Marriott Hotels, the Department of Homeland Security, these are all Salesforce customers, right? So you're putting your data in one of the world's most trusted places to store your data. The way I typically describe it is there's four very large cloud computing companies in the world: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and actually Salesforce. You're putting your data in one of the world's most trusted places to put it. Yet what you are keeping is the ability to customize what you've done pretty much however you'd like, even down to writing your own code and deploying it on top of Salesforce. So when we talk about what the benefits are, it's partially security. We don't host anybody's data. We actually can't even see a law firm's data. Only they can. They have to proactively let us in for support. So there's a tremendous amount of security that comes. There are no backdoors. There's a tremendous amount of security. There's a tremendous amount of automation that lives behind it, and the ability to be really, really specific with what it does.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. I didn't realize. I'm familiar with Salesforce. I knew they were big. I did not realize how big they were until you just described it
Oh,
that way.
I think their latest market cap is like 50 billion. They just posted their fifth like crazy successful quarter. A fun fact: Salesforce has in their 20 years, I think it's 20 years right now, have never posted a down quarter.
Wow. Wow.
That is incredible. They grew faster than every company out there. And the thing is, unless from a consumer perspective, you don't see them. You don't realize how many of the sites you interact with are actually living on Salesforce. I think Home Depot's like community help site is a Salesforce product. I think Hulu's like help site is a Salesforce community product. There's so much out that you don't really realize, and that you take for granted. And for us, again, I'm proud that our customers' data lives in that place. That I don't have to worry about managing servers and uptime. I get to brag about your law firm, 20 people in Virginia who you wouldn't dream are a Salesforce customer just from the size of the law firm, are a Salesforce customer now, because that's where their data sits, on the world's most secure location. So it's really awesome. If I
Wow.
sound like a fanboy, guilty as charged.
Fair enough. Well, you should be. So I can appreciate that. All right. Well, Dov, thank you so much for joining us today. What's the best way for people to learn more about Litify and yourself, and see if they're maybe a good fit for Litify?
Come to our website, www.litify.com. My email address is dove@litify.com. I'll happily speak to anybody. This is my life's passion. I think you can sense the enthusiasm I have for just operations and technology in general. If anybody wants to have a discussion, a conversation, pick my brain, get an opinion, I love to tell you what I've seen, and I love asking questions. So if you are looking for a conversation, be prepared. I have more questions I think can help uncover answers, but yeah, reach out, come to our website, and happy to chat.
Great. Thanks so much. And everybody else, we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.